This is the Candidly Kim podcast.
Welcome back to the Candidly Kim podcast. It has been a week. We're doing this in a two-parter because there's so much. And last time we talked about elections. Today we're going to talk about some COVID stuff. So welcome. We have our great producer, Doran Barton, with us here.
Hello.
Spit Take Brigade.
Yes, come visit the Spit Take Brigade. And if you're tired of Facebook, some of that Spit Take Brigade content is showing up on Parler.
Okay, then I have no reason to stay at Facebook. No reason to stay with Facebook. If Doran took the Spit Take Brigade over to Parler, then yeah, done. There is supposed to be an exodus to Parler.
Parler, MeWe, whatever. You know, I've been looking at a lot of different alternatives to Facebook and Twitter. Parler seems to be the big one. They've been taking a beating from all the interest for sure. But
There was another walk away. So there's the Facebook. I forget. Anyway, so yeah. Right now, everybody's kind of posting their on Facebook. They're posting their Parler usernames, and so yeah, you have a chance to recreate yourself there too. A new platform. Get used to the interface. I mean, I just remember. I just hated Apple. I used to be just all Android everything. I was very, very resistant. Couldn't figure it out. Now I speak the language. So, be patient moving over to Parler. And we're all going there. So just at least all the cool people.
All the cool people.
But I wonder if they'll come up with like endless labels that they stick on every post. I mean, that on Facebook now you can't even put a meme that Facebook doesn't say this is questionable content or something, or this is disputed content. I'm like, come on, it's satire. It's satire, or whatever. It's just crazy. So people are done. People are done with that.
And yeah, we should devote a whole episode on that because it goes beyond the politics.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll do that. That's a good idea. All right, Utah, because we like to be first in so many things and the number one in lots of things, and we are usually number one on the best things. Right now, we lead the country as one of the most restrictive. There's a batch of them. I can't remember all the other states, but there's about 4 or 5 of us. That was on the 10 o'clock news last night as the several most restrictive states due to COVID. So we haven't talked a lot about COVID, the disease, COVID, the science, COVID, the masks. Mainly on this podcast, we have dealt with the issue of separation of powers when it comes to who makes laws constitutionally in our nation, in our state. The legislature makes laws. And we have had the condition over the last many, many months where our governor issued emergency declarations, and statutorily by law, he could not extend that beyond 30 days without the legislature allowing him to, without the legislature voting. And in a very, very real sense, that's you, the citizen, voting, your voice being represented through someone like me who was elected to carry your voice to Capitol Hill and make policy decisions. So Governor disregarded that and had extended the emergency declaration for months, and described.
Well, let's clarify there. The way that he extended it was simply by redeclaring.
Yeah. So he described that he wasn't exactly extending; he was just redeclaring Which, okay, so honestly, there are some things that you got to point out when they're absurd, you know?
Yeah.
And some things are just facially absurd. No, it's the same disease,
Right.
COVID-19. It has a name, it has questionable origin, but that is the disaster. That is the emergency. So anyway, I've been a very strong proponent of making sure that your voice is taken to Capitol Hill when it deals with policies. Well, now we have the strictest policies, some of the strictest in the country. They're pretty harsh. I mean, they're pretty strong. They're pretty limiting. And I really don't know that I want to get into right or wrong. Although I do disagree with a lot of the aspects of our responses. But you know what I'd really like to do, Doran, is I would like to have that conversation not just here with you in a camera. I'd like to have that with 75 House reps and 29 senators.
That are representing the citizens.
That
of the
represent the
state.
citizens. That's where we should have this debate. Instead, the people are denied their
Well, wait,
voice.
you know, it takes so long. It takes so long to get the legislature together for a meeting. I mean, that would just take forever.
Okay, this thing happened in COVID where everybody learned to use virtual meetings, and it's not all that hard.
Oh.
Now, I say that because I'm not on the technical side of it, but I do know that our system's set up, we can flip the switch pretty quickly and convene as a legislature. That is properly where policy decisions should be made. It is constitutionally where laws should be made. And yet we have seen the executive branch.
So let me ask you, Kim, is it the leadership of the state House and state Senate, are they not responding to what the governor's doing just because they don't want to rock the boat? Is that kind of what you and your fellow legislators are observing, or what?
So there's culture and traditions. I respect my colleagues, but we're in an election year. And some have been influenced by the fact that we're in an election year. Election's over. I don't think that my decisions were, no, I can say absolutely. I think the things I've said, the positions I've taken, the things I've tried to get done, it wouldn't have mattered if I was seeking re-election or not. Because we do this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I take it very seriously to uphold the Constitution. And separation of powers is one of the most critical elements of our government that helps keep government in check, keeps them balanced, keeps power in balance. But we have gone way too long as a state not having the infusion and the participation of the citizen voice through their elected representatives. All the policies around COVID right now are being made by executive branch. And so we had a resolution. So we put forward a public resolution about 2 months ago, got fairly close to having some of the signatures that we needed to have people pay attention. And it was shut down. It was a few weeks before election, and so we didn't get across the finish line with this. So election's over, and it's time to do something. Now, the governor, about a month ago, instead of renewing an emergency declaration, he did something that's been described as making a lateral pass to the health department and said, oh, it's them now. So interesting thing, there might be some disagreement with what I'm going to say. But there are a whole lot of constitutional attorneys looking at this in our state and across the country and looking at what are the paths when you have a Gretchen Whitmer extended declaration beyond 28 days. It was 28 days in their state, although their Supreme Court smacked it down. I think we were headed that way when the pass was made. I think the law is fairly clear there. I don't know that the governor would have been able to withstand a challenge to the notion that he was declaring consecutive emergency declarations. And so now it's come back to the governor, though. So all of our Amber Alerts went off the other night, and we were told to turn our TVs on and watch a very important message. And we heard the governor's issuance of yet another emergency declaration, and this time with a lot more restrictions. So I do want to disclaim right here that I do believe we have people in this process with real concerns. We do have some real health risks, and trying to do their best in their judgments to make sure that we understand the nature of this disease and the appropriate policy responses. But I will tell you this, and because I don't want to disrespect people who are earnestly striving to save lives and improve health conditions. But I trust 104 of those people coming to the table and discussing these things much more than I trust a single executive. And he can have all the best advisors around him. But I trust the 104 of us in the legislature even more to consult with policy advisors, to consult with experts. But most importantly is bringing the people's voice into that discussion. And that's something we haven't had. As I cough into my sleeve with my chronic cough. Excuse me. So it's just a very important principle. And, I think of all the things that I've done as a legislator, lots of bills. I've voted for thousands of bills, sponsored dozens of pieces of legislation, but I don't know if there's really anything more impactful or more important than protecting our system of checks and balances and separation of powers. That's how we keep tyranny in check, and the flip side of tyranny is freedom. It's how we maintain freedom. It's how we keep a check on tyranny.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point, and that is that the process that the governor is using really doesn't involve the people at all. And, there's been a lot said about nationally how we've responded to COVID. It's not different on the state level, wherein I think this is such an imperfect analogy, but the expression surgeons are going to cut. If you go see a surgeon for whatever your ailment is, they're going to find a way to cut. When we just listen to the health, the physiological health professionals, disease experts, they are going to be the equivalent of surgeons going to cut. And so this is why it's important on such big, impactful policy decisions that we have more perspective at the table. And now I don't always agree with where we land on 100, where the 104 people land on every policy decision we make. I mean, there's been significant policy decisions that I've been an outlier. I've been in a minority. I haven't always agreed. And anybody out there, you can name right off the top of your head, 3 things you don't like that the legislature did. But I trust where we're going to land much more. And and it's not even just trust. It's right. Like, it's so inherently right. And
just as, the will of the people, we're in the middle of a presidential election, other elections, and we're going to get to a point where we're going to acknowledge that we have representatives now that are there because of the express will of the people. We don't have that here. And I feel like, we've had the governor, he's expressed frustration that people aren't doing more, that they're not obeying more, they're not complying more. And I can't help but think that if we had gone through the full legislative process with good, robust deliberation, with you emailing me, you texting me, you calling me and telling me what you want me to do when I show up in that chamber, I can't help but feel like there would be at least a little bit more satisfaction that the people had their voice, and they might not have gotten their way, but by golly, they had a voice in it. And I have learned in my 6 years, actually, I've learned it in my 53 years on the planet, is people very much value being heard. They don't always feel like they have to be right or they have to have their way, but absolutely, they want to know that they were heard. And so I think that a lot of the angst, a lot of the frustration, a lot of the anger, a lot of the concern comes out, and the emotions that are so close to the surface. I can't help but think a lot of that is just because people feel like they weren't involved. You know why? Because they weren't.
Right.
And that is my biggest criticism. I don't even know if I'm ready to criticize exactly what's been done, as much as it just hasn't been done the right way.
Right. Well, we've talked before this about some of the specific aspects of this recent declaration, where things that have traditionally been part of the legislative process that were completely sidestepped and done executively, like the fines and the punishments, basically the consequences of not doing what they're mandating gets you in deep water, or gets a business in deep water with the Labor Commission.
On the fines, okay, so I am still trying to get answers to my questions. So I am still missing pieces. But of course, the governor talked about a $10,000 fine. So I have people asking me, is that individual or just business? But I'll tell you, kind of what through my own family in a tailspin this morning is have a child, a high school student who, they finished all their homework and they haven't seen anybody for a long time. I think there were like 3 of them. They want to go to Chick-fil-A. Now, this is permissible if you're not in a crowd and you're still under numbers and you're 6 feet apart. But they literally had the discussion about what if they get fined for $10,000? And they're like sharing how much allowance they have in their bank accounts, but that there were various, between these 3 or 4 kids, some significant fear of law enforcement. And what do they look like? And, how strict is this enforcement going to be? So we definitely have a new level of panic, concern, anxiety. And so what I did was, and, maybe you might want to do this in your family, but I printed up the order and I handed a copy to my kids. I said, read it, understand it. And so you don't have to debate with your friends, can we go to Chick-fil-A or not? You just can't sit by each other. And I will say the kids in my neighborhood have been incredibly responsible and respectful of all the health recommendations.
So did the kids find anything that stuck out to them as they read through that?
Yes. And this is interesting. This is in the world of unintended consequences. This is why we deliberate 104 people. If you watch the legislative process, you will find so many bills that are not the same as when they started because they get amended. And why do they get amended? Because citizens contribute and say, hey, this is how my family will be impacted. This is how my business will be impacted. So bills get amended. That is why this is important. So one of my kids, he reads the order, and he's in another room of the house, and he comes in. He's exercised, and this is the kid that okay, we just don't love him to get exercised, but he said, you know what this does? This is all the rich kids. So what do you mean? And he says, football, cheer, and dance. He says those are the 3 most expensive activities that happen in a high school. And he says they're exempted. They get to go to their tournaments. They get to do their thing with conditions, with some temperature gauging and testing, stuff like that. But he said nobody else. And he says, you know what? Me and my friends, we play lacrosse because we can afford it. And we don't get to continue our season. And I thought, there's an unintended consequence. So I got to admit, I've mocked that piece a little bit. Seriously? Football's allowed. Nothing else is allowed but football. Okay, we get that. That's the second religion in our state, at least in Texas, where I'm from. It's, there's, football. Football is the state religion. So, but I never thought of it that way. And he said, this isn't fair. And then he asked the question that we all ask. Why? What is different that football is exempted and not lacrosse, not basketball? It's not because there's different levels of contact sports. In fact, lacrosse is not as much contact as football. Football, you literally crash into people, that struck me. That's what a student, a 16-year-old, instantly observed, is this has an income disparity, a class, socioeconomic class.
That was
disparity.
An astute observation, for sure.
Instantly, and I'm telling you, I did not instigate that. I did not plant that seed. Smart kid, but he came out he's like. And then asks why, what is the science why? So I think for a lot of people, and again, I don't, we'll probably have a day that will come on and we'll debate the science. But what is hard to accept is the incongruent things. No alcohol after 10 o'clock because something, is it like an atmospheric thing that happens when the earth tilts a certain way and the moon is in the sky or something at 10 o'clock? Something happens with COVID and it's more aggressive.
COVID's like a werewolf that watches the clock. 10 o'clock, it's on you.
10 o'clock.
In the bar.
In the bar. So someone messaged me today, someone that I respect, and said, it might not be helpful to joke about some of these conditions because we need unity. That unity thing again. But I thought, you know what? Sometimes when things are just incongruent and absurd, it's also a way to point out these are inconsistencies and their unintended consequences. So let me just mention this. My husband is a superintendent of education for schools for deaf and blind, and he meets and discusses regularly with superintendents from other schools. A very frightening occurrence is happening in some of the districts where they have a choice. Some of the bigger districts, especially, that have given students a choice of staying home and learning online virtually or being in brick and mortar. Again, there is another income disparity, and it's pretty significant. More students in that are closer and below poverty lines are choosing to stay home, or they're exercising that option of staying home versus going to brick and mortar. Much more to a much higher degree. I want to say somewhere in like the 80 percentile. Students in lower economic brackets are staying home.
Wow.
And now, what happens frequently among those students is they can tend to have less reliable devices and less reliable connectivity. So the students who are choosing to stay home are the ones, or to a larger degree, are the ones that have problem with have barriers to virtual learning. I have literally not heard anybody talk about that. Nobody's talking about these. These are students who are historically also been prone to also have lower test scores. And we talk a whole lot about equity in education, a whole lot about equity in education. But I don't hear anybody talking about this. What's happening to the students? So we ask the question, why do you think, what's going on there? Why are those students, and some very interesting answers, okay? Because more of them tend to come from either single parent homes or dual working parent homes.
Right.
Where the parents may not be in a situation with their employment where if their children are quarantined and they are subsequently also quarantined, frequently they don't have jobs that can wait for them 2 weeks in a quarantine. We see some of those students are also staying home and attending other younger students, and that can be a potential even outside of COVID. But this is a new situation that is impacting some students, and so I don't have all the data on that. I'm asking the questions now. I know it's happening in some districts, and some of the good superintendents are looking at that and looking at why there's students who really need to be in maybe supported a little. I don't know how to say that, but we may have just created some greater inequity in our public education. The other thing I hear, and I'd love to hear from you, is students with disabilities who are on individual education plans. They're called IEPs in the ed world, and if you are a parent of one of these students, you know what I mean. They're not getting the services that they are required to receive under federal law and state law. So just about every day I'm hearing from parents who are telling me, yeah, their accommodations aren't there. They're maybe not possible. They're maybe just not practical. I have a friend who said that her district, she has a student with, or a child with Down syndrome, and the district handed her an iPad and said, go work on an iPad 7.5 hours a day. And she's like, okay, you don't get this. It doesn't work like that. So I'm trying to get some more information on how much those students are being left behind as well. If you're one of those parents, you have due process rights, so you can contact the state Division of Students with Disabilities, and you have advocacy, and you need to report that. But I'd like to know kind of to what degree that is, because I'm hearing a lot. So we have this order in front of us that is dealing with social distancing, gathering, and masks. But there's a whole world of stuff that we're not hearing about. We're not addressing the needs of our lower income students who are in growing virtual learning situations, our students with disabilities, and mental health. Talking a lot about mental health these days.
Yeah.
Increases in suicide rates, increases in domestic violence, increases in divorce filings, increases in treatment for mental health, suicidal ideation, anxiety,
Drugs, alcohol. Yeah.
drugs, definitely substance abuse on the rise. And, at what point do we talk about the trade-offs?
Right.
And so then that gets a little bit more into the science. But I will tell you that I would much, much rather have 104 people deliberating all the science.
Right.
And whether this is an appropriate response.
I did see a headline that the Utah Education Association, that's the state teachers union, was not consulted on this executive action, which, I guess that's one way that some people could be more involved. But here, the teachers, they were not represented at all, or didn't feel like they were represented.
Well, and they are exempted, in the order. The school districts, charter schools, and private schools, education institutions basically are exempted. The higher education institutions have a lot more enforcement coming around the corner, a lot more testing, more enforcement of the distancing, things like that. But I do want to throw in one thing, okay? We're having this response because we are reporting alarmingly high case numbers. Okay, so in the world of, I don't want to argue the science and debate the science with just me, you, and the camera. I just want to throw this out there because it's New York Times. New York Times article this week titled, "Your coronavirus test is positive. Maybe it shouldn't be." And this is a very interesting article now. Fauci talked about this recently. Now, this is not brand new information. But as we are testing more and more frequently and more volume of testing, this article points out that our tests are unnecessarily too sensitive. So it is, it would be like taking a pregnancy test. You're not really pregnant, but there's a little trace of the hormone that when it reaches a certain threshold, then it shows up as a plus on the stick or whatever. Is that an okay analogy to use?
I don't know. It's like you're a little bit pregnant, so we'll just say you're pregnant.
Well, but the hormones in there. So interesting. So here's what the article says. The PCR test, that's a particular type of test that's being used quite mostly. It amplifies genetic matter from the virus in cycles. And the fewer cycles required, the greater amount of virus. So there's a number of 40 somewhere that most of these tests cycle 40 times. And look 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 and look. And if they don't find it the first time, that means there's not a lot of virus there. So we look again. And we look again, and we look again, and we look 40 times. We cycle this 40 times looking for any trace. And that just simply is too sensitive. It doesn't tell us really what we need to know. And you gave me an example of your dad, Doran.
Yeah. Dad's 87, tested positive. He quarantined like he was supposed to. Never felt any symptoms. I think he had a runny nose the whole time, but it never really went beyond that. And thankfully.
Yeah. So we.
Now let me add that he got tested because he and my mom played cards with a friend that they play cards with a lot, and that friend was admitted to the hospital with COVID, and ended up dying a few days later. So it's not always a happy outcome for everybody, but in my dad's case, he tested positive. We don't know why, because he didn't develop the condition that his friend did.
Well, and there is this this idea of viral load. So
Right.
how big is the exposure that you have that is more likely to develop into
inoculum.
the disease,
Yeah,
or
the
if it's a
inoculum.
small viral load that your system may be able to just take care of it. But so they go on to say that the number of, let me just repeat it, the number of amplification cycles needed to find the virus, and that's called the cycle threshold, is never included in the results sent to doctors and coronavirus patients. All you get is just
Yes or no.
the yes or no. So the greater the viral load, the more likely the patient is to be contagious, but we don't know what the viral load is, and these tests are very, very sensitive. So they go on to say in 3 sets of testing data that include cycle thresholds compiled by officials in Massachusetts, New York, and Nevada, up to 90% of the people testing positive carried barely any virus. And here's some numbers for you. So on Thursday, last Thursday, the U.S. recorded 45,000 new coronavirus cases. And if those rates of contagiousness in those states apply nationwide, then only 4,500 of those people would have actually needed to socially distance, and submit to contact tracing. So really only 4,500 people in the whole country would need to respond as if they were contagious. But we just sent a 3,000, 4,500 people nationwide, but we just sent a 3,000 student high school home. And we said everybody's on home learning right now. So the New York Times goes on to say one solution would be to adjust the cycle threshold now used to decide that a patient is infected. So again, if we're doing these 40 cycles and looking for any trace at all, and they're not likely to be sick, we could adjust that. Most tests set the limit at 40, some at 37. This means that you're positive for the coronavirus if the test process requires up to 40 cycles just to detect the virus. And I like this. They said the tests with thresholds so high may detect not just living virus, but simply also genetic fragments. It's not even the real virus.
So if they only tested like 10 times, that maybe, they'd still catch the people who are really, really infected.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't catch all these people that only have barely the virus.
Barely the virus, that it may detect not just live virus, but also genetic fragments and leftovers from infection that pose no particular risk.
Interesting.
Okay, and they call that akin to finding a hair in a room long after a person has left the room. So I have questions now about this. What are the tests that we're running? We're under contract to buy a 250,000 new tests, and or maybe we have, but we have a lot of people getting frequently tested. We sent a whole, almost 3,000 student high school home because there were 30 students who tested positive. So we've already heard from Dr. Mary Tipton that these kids aren't getting sick. They're not the ones really that struggle with the disease. But of course there are. There's
that whole thing where the kids have grandparents, and they might be exposing those grandparents. It's that whole of if the kids are positive, who are they going to come into close proximity to and possibly expose them? So, yeah, it's complex. So
we may just be capturing unnecessarily too many people in the net, and when we take the kind of drastic measures that we've taken to try to lower the curve again, to try to stem the tide of the rising cases, what do case numbers tell us? And in light of knowing this, that our tests are too sensitive, we're capturing way too much in the net. And I don't know that for sure. I don't know if we're using those sensitive tests, but it is the one that is primarily used. So I'll be finding that out, but it's an interesting thing to, if we are going to take the kind of measures that we have, where, you can't, the social distancing, the gathering, It's the gathering that's limited. The questions I'm getting asked the most is, can I have Thanksgiving? Can Grandma come home for Thanksgiving? And now this order is supposed to lift by Thanksgiving. But if the numbers are still going up, I don't know what the scientific justification would be to lifting it. If your contention is that this is how we need to do it. But
I predict that will be required by law, by declaration, that we must all wear 2 masks.
2 masks. Okay. But I trust 104 of us deliberating all the science, the range of possibilities. I don't want to be talking about the New York Times article with just me and you and a camera. I'd like us to be talking 104 of us and bringing in doctors, bringing in healthcare professionals, bringing in epidemiologists and whoever we need. And let's not forget the economy. Let's not forget mental health. Let's not forget students who may be left behind in our education response as well. So I'm still on that bandwagon. I mean, I'm still moving full speed ahead, looking for ways to bring the voice of the people back into this process.
Well, what can the people do? Should they be talking to their senators, their representatives?
Absolutely.
Telling, letting them know now that the election's over, make your voice heard to the higher ups. Let's make a change in how these types of policies are handled.
Absolutely. This is what you need to do. So call your state senator, your state house rep, and ask them for a special session. So right now we're in the middle of November, early November, and so some of you are being told, "Oh, well, we'll take care of that in January." Do you know how far away January is? And it's even more impactful in the life of a child.
We're not really sure that 2020 is actually going to end on December 31st. So, don't make any assumptions at this point.
All righty. So please do that. Ask your elected officials to talk to their leadership and say it's time. It's time to call your voice back into a special session. And we may get to the same place. We may decide that these orders are right and appropriate. And I, for one, will feel better about that than when one person makes this decision. So one person in a health department. I know. Okay. Well, did we cover everything?
I think
we
so.
We had plans tonight? Okay. Thanks for being involved, and do stay safe out there. And thanks for listening to the Candidly Kim podcast, where you can also find us on our awesome producer, Doran Barton. Where can people find us?
Everywhere that good podcasts can be found.
You might have taken that from John Dougal.
Oh, no. Okay.
Everywhere we're good. You can find us on YouTube, Podbean, iTunes. We're under approval for Spotify, so we should be up on Spotify soon. And but please give us a follow. Please share with your friends. It's very helpful for us if you give us a follow and a share. Then more people see this. And thank you for giving us your time and a listen. Also, comment. Feel free to comment wherever you are watching this. Let us know your thoughts and what you'd like to maybe hear discussed on our podcasts in the future. And thanks so much. Have a great night.